Meeting number 32 of the Standing Committee on International Trade. Today's meeting, if everybody could just calm down, the sooner we get started, the sooner we will be finished. All right, thank you all very much. And thank you to my assistant, Monsieur Savard Tremblay, to keep everybody quiet. Today's meeting has taken place in a hybrid format pursuant to House Order of June 23, 2022. Therefore, members are attending in person in the room and remotely using the Zoom application. I need to make a few comments for the benefit of witnesses and members every day. Please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. When speaking, please speak slowly and clearly. For those participating by video conference, click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you when you are not speaking. With regard to interpretation, for those on Zoom, you have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. The clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. Please also note that during the meeting, it's not permitted to take pictures in the room or screenshots on Zoom. Should any technical challenges arise, please advise me, and please note that we may need to suspend for a few minutes to ensure all members are able to participate fully. As part of the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September the 20th, 22, the committee today we have at the committee meeting Ms. Nadia Theodore, Ambassador and Permanent Representative to the World Trade Organization, virtually. Welcome to our committee, Ambassador Theodore. We will start with your opening remarks of up to 5 minutes and then proceed with rounds of questions. And we're very glad that you were able to join us today and share some information and knowledge with the committee members. So I turn the floor over to you, Madam Theodore.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. As some of you may know, I wear 3 hats here in Geneva. I am the head of the Permanent Mission of Canada to the United Nations, the World Trade Organization, and other international organizations. I am Canada's alternate permanent representative to the United Nations, and I am the ambassador and permanent representative of Canada to the World Trade Organization. And so it is a real pleasure to be here today in my capacity under that 3rd hat as Canada's ambassador to the World Trade Organization, and to update you on latest developments at what is the only global international organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations. The 3 pillars of the WTO, the deliberative, the negotiating, and the dispute settlement pillar, are all of enormous importance to Canada, and the work to maintain, improve, and strengthen all 3 are ongoing. Working to uphold, safeguard, and continuously improve the system has been a cornerstone of Canada's trade policy since its inception and remains so today. With that context, let me move to where we are today. As was the case with many things due to the pandemic, the WTO 12th Ministerial Conference was delayed and eventually took place from June 12th to June 17th, 2022. MC12, as it's known, produced a set of outcomes which represent the most significant package to come out of the WTO in recent years. Now, could there have been a higher level of ambition? Well, Canada is a high ambition, high standard member. So the answer to that question will almost always be yes. However, the MC12 outcomes were significant and set the ground for the pathways forward. Let me provide you with an overview of some of what was achieved. Significant was the WTO agreement on fisheries subsidies. It is the first Sustainable Development Goal target to be fully met, the first SDG target met through a multilateral agreement, the first WTO agreement to focus on the environment, and the first broad binding multilateral agreement on ocean sustainability. The moratorium on not imposing customs duties on electronic transmissions will continue to provide predictability for our businesses and our consumers, as members have agreed to extend the moratorium until the next ministerial conference or until March 2024. Under the consensus-based decision that is commonly known as the ministerial decision on the TRIPS agreement, or the TRIPS waiver, eligible developing country members may waive certain TRIPS provisions on patents for COVID-19 vaccines. MC12 outcomes also included a package on WTO responses to emergencies, a ministerial declaration on the WTO response to the COVID-19 pandemic and preparedness for future pandemics, a decision on World Food Program food purchases, and a declaration on the emergency response to food insecurity. So this is where we are coming out of the last ministerial conference. So where are we going? As I already noted, Canada would have liked to see more ambition at MC12, and we are not alone in that regard. In all three of the pillars, members have already committed to doing more and under ambitious timelines. Members have committed to the restoration of a fully functioning dispute settlement system by 2024. Members have begun work toward the implementation of the fisheries agreement and have already begun work on what I like to call the second generation of the fisheries agreement. Discussions have already begun on whether to extend the TRIPS waiver to cover patents for the production and supply of COVID-19 diagnostics and therapeutics. And there is broad agreement among the membership that a way forward on agriculture is needed. Members are also re-energized around the improvement of the deliberative function of the organization. Work around WTO reform of this function will feature prominently over the coming months. The path to success will be as challenging as we know member-driven, consensus-based, legally binding success to be, but it is doable. Canada will continue our active engagement across all of the pillars. The Ottawa Group, inaugurated in 2018 under Canada's leadership, will continue to serve as a much-needed forum for incubating ideas and creating positive momentum across the organization. This will be of crucial importance in the lead up to MC13, which is expected to take place before March of 2024. Before I close and hand it over for the discussion and questions, let me underscore that overarching in Canada's engagement at the WTO is our commitment to constructive participation in the work on development across the organization and our active engagement on trade and gender and on MSMEs to ensure that these important issues are brought to the forefront. We are also demonstrating considerable leadership in the area of trade and environment and serve as a co-coordinator to the trade and environmental sustainability structured discussions. Thank you very much, and I look forward to the discussion.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. We appreciate your comments. Now we'll open the floor for questions. Mr. Carey, for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Ambassador, thank you so much for being with us. Trade is so important to Canada and our economy. Coming from Oshawa, I really do understand the export-import business, and your synopsis of what's been going on is quite eye-opening. I did want to ask you about the MC12, this dispute settlement system, the appellate body. Everybody's talking about how urgent it is, but the agreement to come together by 2024. What do you think the biggest holdups are? I know the Americans have been hesitant to appoint. Could you please give us a little bit of an update there? Because for us, 2024, that doesn't sound too urgent to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carrier. That's a really good question, and it's so interesting because 2024 does seem like a long time away. And in multilateral, in any negotiation, as I'm sure you would know, but certainly in multilateral negotiations, what seems like a very long time often ends up being a very short time to come to consensus among over 160 members of the organization. So there's that. But maybe what I'll do is say three things about the dispute settlement body, and in particular the appellate body and the holdup. Number one, you are absolutely 100% correct that the reason why we are where we are with the DSB and the appellate body is indeed because the United States, for some time now, has been blocking the appointment of panelists to the appellate body, which renders it not functional. That's number one. Number two, what I would say is it's important to note that members have put together an alternate structure, if I could call it that, actually under the leadership of Canada, called the Multi-Party Interim Appeal, MPIA. I was trying to think of what the acronym actually means because all we do is use the acronym here. And that allows a group of members that have come together to use an appellate mechanism amongst themselves when and if the need to appeal a case comes up. So I think that's important to note because it is not the case that disputes are not allowed to be heard, and if there is a need to appeal, that there is absolutely no mechanism within which to do that. We do have this interim appeal mechanism that Canada has spearheaded and pioneered, which does provide us with an interim solution. So that's number two. Number three, listen, I agree with you that if we could get the United States to stop blocking panelists tomorrow, we would absolutely do that. Right now, what is happening here in Geneva is a very thoughtful and inclusive process is maybe what I'll call it. That is actually spearheaded by the United States, which is good news. It means that they're engaged to bring together the membership to discuss what the issues are with the appellate body system and how we can move to address them in time for this 2024 deadline. That process has started since September and is in the sort of ideas gathering phase. And then starting in January, members are actually going to sit down and look at all of the ideas that have been put forward and see how we can work through those ideas to put forward concrete proposals based on the ideas put forward by members. And so the hope very much is that as we move to the ministerial sometime before March 2024, we will indeed have come to a place where at the ministerial, ministers will be able to sanction, to bless whatever result will bring us to having a fully functioning dispute settlement system, which would include, the ability to appeal by the entire membership and not necessarily just by this interim solution that Canada has spearheaded.
Well, I think it would be great if we could come up with something. I just, I've been around a little while, and it's a little bit concerning when it takes so long. I think the Doha started in 2001, and I think we're at 222, and we still haven't figured all that out yet. The challenges when we have managed economies such as China, I think it was 2001 when China was admitted to the WTO, and when we're talking about fair trade, free trade, I think the Americans do have some legitimate issues with the process, just as Canada does. We can always talk about our softwood lumber issues as well. And I just wonder, how relevant is the WTO, and is it something that Canada really should be looking at our trusted trading partners, people we can count on, that will follow the rules? And with that lead in there, I wanted to ask you about the accomplishment with the fisheries subsidies, the agreement you mentioned in your
Mr.
opening.
Carey,
just wondering how enforceable.
My apologies to interrupt. Your
Already
time was
6 minutes?
Your time was up a couple of seconds ago, and we would like
okay.
to give the ambassador an opportunity to give us some sort of short response, if that's possible.
Yes,
say
for
how
sure.
enforceable
Maybe I'll
it
address
is.
the fisheries.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. I was going to say. So the fisheries agreement. Let me just say that as I mentioned, we concluded it at the last ministerial, and then once 3/4 of the membership have submitted their well, let me say it differently. Once two-thirds of the membership, sorry, I said three-fourths. Once two-thirds of the membership have deposited their instruments of acceptance at the WTO, which really just means that they have done all of their domestic work that they need to do, Canada included, then it will enter into force and will indeed be fully enforceable at that moment in time. And so absolutely the agreement, even though I did mention that we have already started negotiations on the elements that we were not able to conclude, it's really important to recognize that what we did conclude at MC12 is absolutely a full agreement that members are now going to their domestic, through their domestic processes at home. And once we have two-thirds of the membership that has fully deposited their instruments of acceptance, it will indeed come into force and be fully enforceable.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. On to Mr. Virani for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Theodore. It's a real pleasure to have you here. We're really grateful to have you in the position that you are in. And I know Minister Ng really values and relishes her working relationship with you as recently as at the recent MC12 that just took place. So I just want to build on some of your opening comments and just ask you a little bit about, the tail end you talked about sort of Canada's role in advocating for trade and gender. You obviously are well situated to comment upon this. You know about what we did with the recent renegotiation of CUSMA, including a trade and gender chapter. I'm sure you're quite familiar with the importance that on gender that the Prime Minister has placed for our government, what he's provided in the mandate letter of Minister Ng. Could you comment on sort of how Canada can really take a leadership role in advocating for more inclusive trade, including for women, with respect to our interactions with the WTO?
Yes, absolutely. And first of all, thank you very much for those kind words. It really, truly is a pleasure to be representing Canada here at the World Trade Organization. Let me say a couple of things. Canada has, for the past several years, really taken a leadership role in the organization at the WTO, both in terms of the policy piece of trade and gender, and in particular, women in trade. So everything that is about mainstreaming issues of gender across all of our agreements. And that is as, I was going to say basic, but that makes it sound negative, but as basic as looking at how some of our agreements, when they were first negotiated, didn't take into account the fact that some of the barriers that are faced by those companies that are actually using the agreements differ depending on whether they are women-owned businesses or not. So taking a look at that, to things that are a little bit more sophisticated and a little bit more cross-cutting across the organization. For example, looking at how the WTO as a negotiating body works and deals with women-owned businesses, for example, by allowing them to participate as observers in some meetings and in events that we have at the WTO, and working more closely with some of the WTO and United Nations organizations, in particular the International Trade Center, which Canada just recently recommitted funding to. And the International Trade Center is a joint WTO and United Nations organization that is really geared towards helping small businesses, in particular women-owned, youth-owned, youth-led, and Indigenous organizations, particularly in developing countries, access markets, and also creating the environments in those developing countries so that they can also better utilize exports from other countries that are looking to enter their markets.
Thank
And
you very much,
Canada-
Ambassador Theodore. I just wanted to jump in with another question here.
Yeah.
You also mentioned when you talked about sort of Canadian leadership, you mentioned the Ottawa Group, and we've had that in place since 2018, and as another illustration of Canadian leadership at the WTO. But you mentioned again at the end of your remarks a bit about trade and the environment, and I want you to connect that to something that you addressed with Mr. Carey, which is about getting the fish subsidies, the fishery subsidies, sort of hammered out. How do you connect sort of ensuring the sustainable development goals that are being met in line with sort of protecting global fish stocks with the broader agenda to ensure that the work of Canada at the WTO and the WTO writ large is ensuring that we are handling trade in a more environmentally sustainable manner? So if you can just connect those two for us, please. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So as I mentioned, the fishery subsidies agreement is indeed the first agreement that fully meets one of the SDGs, so SDG 14.6, and indeed it is around controlling and regulating subsidies for fish stocks, and is the first multilateral agreement that actually deals with trade and environment. And Canada has, and I mentioned in my comments through our work on the trade and environment sustainability discussions, and our leadership role, frankly, in concluding the fisheries agreement, which again is actually a concluded agreement, and we have just continued the work to go even further. So there is more to hammer out, but we actually do have an agreement, which is very important, and which Canada played a leadership role on. That was the result of all members through the leadership of Canada recognizing that sustainability issues and environment issues are at the core now of every multilateral organization, whether we like it or not. Issues surrounding sustainability and environment are crucial to the way that we negotiate trade agreements and the way that we set up the environment for trade for our companies. And as a common global good that the environment is, all members at the WTO really recognize that this global problem of climate change requires global solutions. And that is really why the WTO, through leadership by Canada and by others, has really taken that step with the fisheries agreement, but is again going further right away with a second generation of an agreement, and also continuing work on trade and environment writ large across the organization.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Ms. Ursula Tremblay for 6 minutes, please.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, and welcome to all my colleagues, and thank you, Madam Ambassador, for being here with us today. I have to admit that I was a tad struck in your presentation. We know that the elephant in the room is the appellate organisation and dispute settlement mechanism, and I'm going to ask you a specific question about that, but you didn't specifically raise it in your brief. That is the stumbling block. We know that full well. You talked of good intentions. The Americans have a more fully fledged plan. Is it true that the Americans are undertaking to think about the issue, but that's the extent of the commitment? Well, thank you very much, sir, for the question. No, I think that it goes a bit further than that. It's not just about thinking about the issue. And I admit that we have been thinking about the question for quite some time. And it's not just now that the US has flagged its issues with dispute settlement mechanisms at the WTO. They've had issue with it for a number of years, and we've been thinking about it for quite some time. Now, we are just starting the work at hand to address the issue, and that is because ministers in June at the MC12 have given members a very clear mandate about finding a solution to the problematic. Now, I should also point out that, and this is bears knowing, well, obviously this is an issue, 100% so, and we're working very hard on the issue. But the fact of the matter is that under Canada's initiative, or the initiative that Canada spearheaded, the MPIA, there is a mechanism currently for dispute settlement at the WTO. It's not as if we were making a case before the WTO that there is no dispute settlement mechanism whatsoever. There is one. It's not the best one, and it's not a permanent fix. That's 100% clear. However, under this initiative, we have a way among members of settling disputes as needed. So it's crucial to stress that point, and also to stress the fact that it's not just a matter of talking about these issues or thinking about potential solutions. We are working hard on tangible solutions. And I said in January, the process is just getting started when it comes to developing concrete proposals with a view to arriving at solutions. Well, what's the track record when it comes to this initiative? You said it's an alternative solution. It's a plan B whilst the dispute settlement mechanism is developed. How many friendly agreements will there be until that mechanism is put in place? That's a very good question. Either. It's an either-or question to an extent, isn't it? We have just one case currently that reached the stage of being dealt with under the MPIA. And it's not because the initiative isn't working properly, it's just that to date there haven't been any cases that reached that stage. And yet the initiative is in place and members can have recourse to it and use it as they see fit. There you have it. Inaudible for the interpreter. Well, perfect. So you said that there have been one case to date that was addressed under the dispute settlement system that's temporary, the MPIA. It's a temporary solution, and I think that sums up your remarks on the matter. Now, before we dig a bit deeper on certain other issues, the whole overhaul or reform of the WTO, is it focusing on the institutional blockages within the system and roadblocks, or have there been discussions about the direction the WTO is taking? In the wake of COVID, apparently, ostensibly, one no longer wants to rely on trade as the only form of subsistence for humanity. What is the thinking process here? Well, that's a great question. In my opinion, yes. Well, yes. The whole notion of reforming the WTO, well, it's a good thing right out of the starting gates. That is, having in-depth discussions about what the WTO is, what it means, if the WTO is fit for purpose, how we can ensure that the WTO remains the best way of addressing international trade issues. And take a deep dive. Yes, indeed, that's important. It's not because, it's a question of just hoping to improve things, that it signifies that things aren't working well. Yes, the WTO is working well, and it's an organisation that's important, especially for a country like Canada, a country that relies on exports and international markets and clear rules and yardsticks that are multilateral in nature. That's crucial for a country such as Canada. However, can we always and forevermore, how should I put this, do better? Well, yes, of course we must. Absolutely. And the answer to your question is quite simply yes. We should take a closer, harder look at all of this. But that doesn't necessarily mean, in doing so, that things aren't working well currently. They do work well, but we want to do better in the future.
Ambassador, I'm letting everybody go over a bit of their time simply because the answers are so important, and so I'm kind of letting things go a little bit longer. Ms. Barron, welcome to the committee today.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to be here today. Thank you for the warm welcome and sending regrets from MP Massey, who's not able to be here today. I'm sitting here thinking about how fortunate I am to be here on the same day as the Ambassador and to hear the updates around all that's happening and getting caught up on this information, of course. Ambassador, you had spoken about around the updates around the fishery subsidies, and I appreciate you speaking around the narrative that occurred around this being a global problem that requires global solutions, and around the subsidies that are prohibited, specifically around the IUU, the illegal, unreported, and unregulated fisheries. My critic role, just for context, is in the Fisheries Committee. So I'm particularly interested in hearing from you a little bit more. You had talked about also around the importance of helping small businesses in another topic, and how does that link together? How are members speaking about the importance of us having sustainability in an environment while also ensuring that small businesses and fishers are part of the equation in decisions moving forward?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So just to say, first, you're absolutely right. The agreement has several new measures that ban subsidies for illegal fishing, for overstocked fish, and on the unregulated seas, as you mentioned. I want to actually also just note, and this kind of goes to the second part of your questions around small businesses and medium-sized businesses, that the agreement and where we landed on this agreement was done within and consistent with Canada's existing programs. So Canada actually did not have to make any domestic changes in order to fulfill our responsibilities under the agreement. And I say that because, and this was a discussion, even though I wasn't at MC12 because I just took up my role in September, but this was quite a discussion in the fisheries subsidies negotiations around how do we, on the one hand, recognize that at the end of the day, protecting our environment and continuing to regulate subsidies in a way that allows us to protect our environment is required. Because frankly, if we don't do it, there will not be any fish for our small and medium-sized fishers to fish. But on the other hand, recognizing that many domestic programs around the world are indeed set up to support small and medium-sized businesses in order for them to survive and thrive. And in particular, as you noted, and as you would very well know, in Canada, where we have very small and medium-sized fishers that depend on being able to fish and being able to export their product, finding that balance is really and truly important. And, I believe that the agreement that we came up with at MC12 satisfies that. And I have to say that, as part of the negotiations, we also recognize that there's a role for everybody to play within this realm of it being a global good and a global purpose. There is a role for all of us to play to help developing countries who might indeed have a little bit further of a way to go to live up to the commitments that were made, and in particular to continue to be able to support their small and medium-sized businesses. Because as you know, Canada really truly believes that the climate change and environment is really a global solution problem that requires a global solution. And so as part of the agreement, we set up what's called a fish fund, which is a fund that will provide technical assistance and capacity building to qualifying members to help them implement the agreement. And as we all know, part of the purpose of multilateral trade rules, and the fish subs agreement is no different, is the idea that when members, in particular developing country members, and in particular members that aren't necessarily as far along as perhaps a country like Canada is, when they are able to implement their commitments to the fullest extent possible, what it really does is help create a level playing field and a degree of predictability and certainty for our Canadian companies. And so Canada was really and truly quite open to the idea of this voluntary fish fund, because by providing assistance to developing members to bring them up to fulfilling their commitments under the agreement, it actually, at the end of the day, benefits them, but also benefits us, and in particular, our small and medium-sized companies, in being able to navigate the rules of trade in global markets.
I'm sorry, Ms. Barron, there's 10 seconds left, so on to Mr. Martel, please, for 5 minutes.
Bon, tout d'abord, merci, Madame la...
Well, thank you, Madam Ambassador, for being here with us today, and thank you for responding in French. I appreciate it. So I'll try and be concise. I'd like to ask one question and then share my time with my colleague Tony here. Now, here's my question. Since the softwood agreement was entered into or came to a close in 2006, there are a number of disputes between Canada and the US on softwood lumber. Minister Ng last August said that she intended to challenge the duties that the US was levying under Chapter 6 or 10 of the use of the US-Canada-Mexico trade agreement. So what is happening with Canada and this softwood lumber dispute? How is it that it hasn't been settled after a 16-year time frame has elapsed? Well, that is quite the question, isn't it, sir? That is the money shot question, to put it plainly. Now, if I knew why that issue had not yet been fully addressed, i.e. the softwood lumber disputes,
I would be a very popular woman around town, I think,
because softwood lumber, you're entirely right, has been an issue that's been dragging on for years and years. Well, the fact is that we hear constantly that the relationship between the US and Canada is good. So the relationship's good, running smoothly, and yet this doesn't. How do we reconcile that with this? Well, obviously nothing is perfect. No relationship is ever perfect. I always suggest that we are like a family with the United States. And I know that in my family, at least, I don't know about yours, but nothing is ever perfect, is it? So with that in mind, one is always going to have issues with one's friends, and that is the case for us and our US friends. And that is particularly true of softwood lumber. Quite clearly, the United States knows that their position is ridiculous. I don't mince words there. But they don't want to backtrack on that position. curiously. And so things have dragged on and dragged on, and it has become quite apparent that we are right, that Canada is right in terms of our position on this issue. And yet the US continues to dig in its heels and push back on this issue. So quite clearly, this is frustrating for all parties. And
I wish I had a better answer.
But you're right. It is highly frustrating, and this has been going on for years and years, and yet we continue to fight. Thank you, Madam Ambassador. I'll hand the floor to Tony.
Quickly, Ambassador, congratulations on your appointment, and thank you for being here. You had mentioned the MPIA. So two quick questions. It was established, 18 or 19 nations are taking part of it, but the value of having that institution is if the Americans aren't participating in that panel. And then you also talk about the one case that's come forward to the MPIA. And if you can mention quickly what that deals with.
I knew you were going to ask me what case it was, and I can't remember. So I will look it up and come back to you. I can't remember what the case is because it's upcoming with the MPIA. But what was the second part of your question? I'm sorry.
Of having the MPIA, if the Americans are not members of that, as well as the challenges with the dispute settlement. I mean, if they're not appointing individuals to the appellant body there, and they're not participating in MPIA, one of the largest trading countries in the entire world is missing from those bodies. So how effective can it really be?
Well, I mean, I would say that it's still effective because while absolutely the United States is a user of the system, they haven't actually what we call here appealed into the void, so to speak. So they haven't. It's not that they have. It's not that they are trying to proactively agitate the system by appealing into the void, knowing that they're blocking appellate body members and knowing that they're not parties to the MPIA. So that's a good thing, and speaks to the continued usability of the system. 100%. I'm not going to pretend that if there does come a time before 2024 where the United States appeals a case, hasn't appointed members to the appellate body, is blocking members to the appellate body and is not part of the MPIA, that it makes it more difficult to resolve the appeal. Nothing prevents, and this has happened as well in a couple of cases here in Geneva, nothing prevents members from looking to find a solution entre eux, like between themselves or amongst themselves, to a dispute that they where they don't agree with the ruling. And so, is it, again, and I think I said this in my previous answer, is it 100% ideal? I mean, absolutely not. That's why we're working to find a solution. But it at least is something. And I found the case. It's the Colombia French fry case, which I should have actually remembered.
Thank you very much,
Colombia
Ambassador.
French fry case with the EU.
Mr. Aria, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Ambassador, for spending few minutes with us today. You talked about 3 pillars to work at the WTO. the deliberative pillar, the negotiating pillar, and the dispute settlement pillar. Instead of your 3 pillars, I want to take back to the 3 pillars proposed by the Deputy Prime Minister in her speech a couple of weeks back in Washington. I'm sure you must have heard it or read about it. In my opinion, Deputy Prime Minister basically said the globalization and the global trade system, as we know, is almost done. In fact, she was specifically referring to the rules-based system of global free trade as we had practiced during the last several decades, which was quite successful as far as the trading went. But the fundamentals have changed during the pandemic and what is happening currently in the world today. The 3 pillars she mentioned in my own, and I'm paraphrasing here. First, she said that the liberal democracies, the Western liberal democracies, basically the Western Europe, the North America, Australia, Japan, Korea, we should have our own economic cooperation. Then the second pillar she suggested, which I think she also acknowledged that the hardest is, what do we do with the countries in the middle? The countries in Asia, Africa, Latin America, who are not as liberal democracies as we are, who do not follow the global order-based system as we do. What do we do with them when it comes to, say, friendshoring, the term that was used by U.S. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen? The third pillar the Deputy Prime Minister mentioned was that we have to deal with our adversaries like China and Russia without naming them, that we have to work with them to tackle climate change, to deal with security, armed security. Basically, she said that we should go back to the ways we used to deal when it was Cold War, that when we learned to contain and engage with them at the same time. So these are the 3 pillars. I would like, number 1, to start your opinion on her entire speech.
Okay. Well, let me first say that I think that dissecting our Deputy Prime Minister's speech is probably best done with her in the room to be able to speak to what she meant, to not paraphrase, and to really sort of have a discussion with you on what that all means. What I can say, frankly, from my perspective and from my seat and from my mandate here in Geneva and representing Canada at the World Trade Organization, is that regardless of how you characterize countries yesterday, today, and tomorrow, having an international organization, and it is the only house that we have, it is the only international organization that we have, having a one-stop shop where we, Canada, as a quote-unquote middle power, where we can engage.
I have limited time. If I can interrupt here. In your opinion, do you think the current rule-based system of global trade will survive, will be of the same shape, say 5 years down the road?
Well, I hope it's not of the same shape, because if things stay the same forever and ever and ever, that doesn't do us all any good, right? As the world changes.
Will it be as positive as it is today?
Well, absolutely. And if we do our jobs correctly, right? So if we are able to respond to the changes and the issues that are arising today that are of importance to all of us around the world, to our businesses, to our citizens, to our consumers, if we are actually able to use the global trading system in a way that responds to these new issues, absolutely it will be strong. It will be as strong. And if I may, it will be even stronger. And that is part of what WTO reform is all about. That's part of what Canada's leadership is, not just at the WTO, but across our trade policy portfolio with regards.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ambassador. Your information is so valuable, and everybody has so many questions. On to Monsieur Savard-Tremblay for 2.5 minutes, please.
Madam Ambassador, recently, and we discussed this here, we looked at this issue. There was a fear on the part of parliamentarians and the electric vehicles industry that regarding Build Back Better in the United States, the clause was changed for North American procurement and not just American or US procurement. Are you fearful that that won't pass the North American court's litmus test? And what about your appointment to that court in due course? Well, thank you very much, sir, for the question. Really, I have no idea whether or not that will occur, whether it will pass the litmus test. Because, and I say because, there is nothing preventing members from raising an issue with the WTO. We've seen this with the softwood lumber. In the eyes of Canada, the softwood lumber issue is ridiculous. And this whole matter is unfounded. And yet the United States has made an issue of this. So I'm not sure whether the WTO will be seized with that particular case. But if a member comes to the WTO with a particular file, well, that doesn't necessarily mean that Canada is wrong in terms of its position. On the contrary. Well, I'm not intimating that Canada was wrong. In fact, the United States changed their own policies, their own legislation on the issue. I know that the experts don't necessarily agree on this. It becomes a bit of a legal debate. And the biggest law firms in the world will probably, in fact, fight this out much better than we're doing so here. But as an ambassador, I'm wondering if you are able to anticipate what might end up in your courts. And I can hear the bell. So I'll just let you finish, give me an answer to that question.
Maybe I'll do a bit long-winded. I don't know if it will be a case, and it's not because we don't anticipate cases. It's just because, again, like I said, nothing prevents somebody from bringing a case, right? And so, could somebody bring a case? Absolutely. Does that mean that either the United States or Canada or Mexico, any of the USMCA members at tort? No. Does it mean that we wouldn't win the case, or that they would lose the case? No.
Thank you very much.
And so,
thank you, Ambassador. On to Ms. Barron for 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you again to the Ambassador. I'm going to build off the questions I was asking you before. I'm going to be heading right to my Fisheries Committee, and we're going to be doing a study coming up around illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing. And I was wondering if you could build a little bit. I appreciate much of what you talked about around the importance of sustainability, again, within our fisheries, and around the prohibitions in place of WTO members from providing fishery subsidies in the areas as we discussed before. And I'm wondering if you can clarify what was in place prior to these agreements being put into place. How will these be enforced, and how does Indigenous rights play into these discussions? I realize it's a big question, but if you could do your best.
Yeah, so before the agreement, there were not comprehensive disciplines on subsidies. And so with the fisheries subsidies agreement, we actually have enforceable rules that regulate, and I won't go through the three pillars that we already talked about before on the agreement. So before, we had no predictability and no enforceability. And now we have actually put fences around the subsidies in those three areas that we've already discussed. On the question of Indigenous rights, again, I mean, for Canada, and it's an interesting question, and I'm going to take too long, and I'm happy to maybe come back to it. But the question of Indigenous rights in an organization like the WTO is quite complex, because Indigenous peoples in countries around the world mean different things than they do, for example, in Canada or even in North America. And so maybe I'll speak that for Canada, when we were negotiating the fisheries subsidies agreement, like I said, we were very intentional about making sure that we negotiated something that would allow us, again, to balance this idea, this need to, on the one hand, protect our environment, protect the ability of our fishers to fish, and to export, and on the other hand, the need to protect our environment. And
Thank you, Ambassador. My apologies for interrupting. I know we have limited time with you. I have two more speakers here, which should give us about another 8 minutes or so. If you can just bear with us, Mr. Seaback, for 4 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I think I understood when you were answering a question from my colleague, Mr. Baldinelli, that the United States is not part of this, the MPIA. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct, yes.
So when we look at long simmering disputes like softwood lumber, where the U.S. is clearly intent on not resolving the issue at the WTO, they're not going to be part of the MPIA. How does Canada resolve trade disputes with the United States then? It seems like we're sort of in an impossible situation without a solution.
Well, I mean, the good news is that with the United States, we have different forums that we can use, right? So we do have the new NAFTA, the CUSMA, that we can use, it in particular with bois d'oeuvre, with softwood lumber. But again, I think it's important to be frank. Is not having a dispute settlement system with a multilateral appellate body ideal? No, it is absolutely not. And the United States has, for a very long time, put forward their complaints, and we are working towards resolving it. But with the United States in particular, and with softwood lumber in particular, Canada, speaking, selfishly for us, we do have another forum for which we can resolve disputes with the United States.
And that would that would be the government actually doing the tough work of negotiating a settlement, because there clearly won't be a settlement arrived at the WTO or through the MPIA. It would seem to me that the route to resolve this then is a government-to-government approach. Would you agree with me on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, what I would say is, and again, not to be too blunt, but it is not since the appellate body was blocked by the United States that we have not found a solution for softwood lumber, right? The softwood lumber dispute has been going on for decades. So it is not the case that, gosh, if we just had a functioning appellate body this year, we would solve that, that bois d'oeuvre case. That's
softwood lumber dispute with the United States ever been resolved at the WTO, or my recollection is that ultimately it just had to be the government's negotiated a solution. Is that correct?
That's absolutely correct. That's absolutely correct. So the first softwood lumber agreement was indeed a bilateral solution that we reached with the United States, and when that solution expired, we were not able to reach a new deal, a new settlement with the United States, and we continue to work on all fronts, frankly, to figure out a way forward on softwood lumber.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dillon, for 4 minutes, please.
Merci, Madame la Présidente, et merci.
Thank you, Madam Chairperson, and thank you to the Ambassador for being here today to testify before us. I'll be asking 2 questions in a row because I don't have much time. Now, could the committee hear your standpoint about how important the WTO's role and in how the dispute settlement mechanisms are working? Second question, could you also give us a rundown of the schedule for the implementation of the fully functional dispute mechanism, settlement mechanism, between now and 2024? Well, I'll tackle your second question first, if I may. As far as the timeline is concerned, by the end of the year, the members will have worked together to present concepts, ideas that in January will provide the basis for concrete proposals on how to move forward with a fully fledged dispute settlement mechanism. So, between now and the end of the year, we're looking at the concepts and notions. Then in January, we'll be developing concrete proposals with potential concrete solutions developed by the members. And we'll be working on that until we come up with the date for MC13, Ministerial Conference 13, that will take place before March 2024. Now, the other question. If I understood correctly, the link between the WTO as an organisation and the dispute settlement mechanism, is that your question? Yes, indeed. That was my question. Well, listen. As I said earlier, the dispute settlement system is one of the important pillars of the WTO. Being able to settle disputes between parties remains important, very important to the organisation. That much is certain. What I can tell you is that every single member at the WTO, except for one, i.e. the United States, of course, sees the current system in its current iteration as one that works, and one that works sufficiently well to satisfy the needs of members. Could the system be improved? Yes, absolutely so. Could it be enhanced? Absolutely so. But I'm comforted in the knowledge that almost every member, except the United States, sees that the system in its current form, with an appellate body, that it works. Now, in January, when we start discussions on how to move forward by 2024 with a fully functioning system, well, I think that the idea is that all members agree that the system as it currently is does work, and that will put some wind in our sails, in our sense. The impetus to work on real solutions that are specific in order to address the issues raised thus far by the United States. And that's how we'll make headway. Now, I confess yes, this is, given the current political situation, in the United States, given that landscape, sometimes it's difficult to get a commitment from the Americans. But that's why I said a bit earlier that the very fact that the United States not only is participating, but in fact they're the ones that spearheaded the process that we're currently using, that in a sense reassures us that we will be able to address this issue at the next ministerial conference. I'll stop there.
I'm sorry, we just don't have enough time, Ambassador. The committee seems to have thoroughly enjoyed your visit and your questions. We may at some further time want to invite you back for a bit of an update, but thank you for giving us an extra 10 minutes so that all of the members had an opportunity at least to get some of their questions answered to you. So thank you very much. Do you have any closing comments, Ambassador?
Just to say that it was a real pleasure, and it would also be my pleasure to come back at any time.
Okay,
and
wonderful.
Even to answer the hard questions from Monsieur Tremblay.
Okay, thank you very much. We will suspend for a moment while we switch to in camera for a few minutes of committee business. Thank you.